I think the biggest single challenge for me is organisational culture, shifting the culture of an organisation from a lack of awareness to an awareness, and then from an awareness to doing something about it, and then from doing something about it to doing something about it repeatedly and consistently, and how you maintain that as an organisation is critical. I can't remember the exact statistic, but most of the threats are the inside-out threats rather than the outside-in threats from information security. So making sure organisationally your people know why why they need to be aware of it, what they need to do for their jobs as part of that is hugely important. Definitely focus on it. don't leave it to somebody else. I think it's part of a CIO's remit to make sure that information is secure in transit, at rest, and in all parts of the business. I think it's absolutely essential that you get yourself the right people and the right team, and you build that culture from the IT function of securing and caring for systems and data as you would your own front door, your own car, which you never leave unlocked or you never leave insecure. So why would you do that at work? And I think that it starts with the IT function to set that integrity and that benchmark, and then to evangelise it across the business. And that, I think, starts with the CIO. I think making sure you know what's going on in the market. I think the third party is definitely looking at how the industry is moving, the tools, the systems, the partners and supplier ecosystem that you have, making sure it's fit for purpose, making sure it's relevant and current, making sure that you've got your gaps understood and covered when you find them, if you find them, and maintaining that systems framework and that systems integrity is crucial. And then I think probably number 4 is policies, standards and procedures to make sure that you are maintaining your systems. They're patched, they're checked, they're scanned, and that's an operational function, but it sits between your operational teams and your security teams to work in that partnership and to understand what needs to be done from the business point of view. I think the number of threats and the complexity of threats just continues to increase. I think staying on top of that is a huge challenge. I think the volume of data that generates for teams and systems to try and pick through is going to be increasingly challenging, and certainly that's where artificial intelligence and machine learning come into that, and to try and get those newer technologies working as the filters necessary to provide the focus so that the teams are doing the right things at the right time, I think is going to be hugely important. I think it depends on the remit the organisation want for the role. Within my organisations in the past, the CISO has always reported into the CIO, and I think that's appropriate. I also think that it's up to the role of governance to make sure that the CISO feels and is empowered to talk directly to the board as and when required, and that governance framework and that governance model needs to make sure that CISO to board interaction is valid and present at all times. Well, it's an interesting question as well, because any business that thinks they don't have to worry about information security is clearly misguided. So it's every business now has to focus on it, because even the smallest ones could either be attacked, threatened, held hostage, or otherwise compromised. And if they're not compromised from an information security point of view, they could well run the risks of being in breach of legislation or regulation. So I think the regulation will increase. I think we'll have to focus on that for the next few years. I think there's other things coming through now, like PSD2, following GDPR, that organisations have to focus on. There's a security remit within those regulations. But I think the overarching remit is it's going to take an increasing amount of time and effort to respond to the information security challenges of any business over the next 3 years. And I think the businesses who don't focus on that appropriately run the risk of serious detrimental brand impact if they do run into a problem. It's tough. I mean, you've got to make sure you're prioritising. and prioritising appropriately. I think you've got to make sure you understand the systems that are moving, the connectivity between the systems, and work with those to make sure that as you move, you're not leaving back doors or things that are open. I think you've got to have a good, strong partner and supplier network, and make sure that they're being held to account to be as diligent about their systems that they're running and maintaining on your behalf as you are as a team or a function or a business. And then I think it's just about having the right people. I think you have to trust your people and your teams to do the right thing as they're moving those systems. It becomes a question of requirement, a question of design, a question of build, and a question of testing. And if you've got the right mechanisms and processes in each of those phases, you've got to make sure that they're used appropriately to catch those challenges and issues before you push to production. And if you've got any doubts, you don't push to production. Yeah, so from my point of view, the positives are the volume of data that's now involved in information security and the challenges of analysing that. It's beyond human capability. So the use of AI and machine learning to filter that data and manage that data and get you to the right insights that you can then action, I think is hugely powerful. I think the downside is that you've still got to have a human doing some of that upfront intelligence, and a lot of security threat is based on reusing a pattern or reusing a policy that's already there. And AI and machine learning is often now still only as good as some of the human inputs. And you hear a lot about AI bias because humans have applied a bias to it before they let it loose. And I think the caution has to be at the moment, how do you filter appropriately but not with the bias that could allow that pattern to be available still for a breach or a malicious actor. It's a work in progress. I think it takes time, it takes trust, it takes momentum, and I think that's from both sides. I think while you're still talking about IT in the business, I think you're probably still in the wrong place. I think once you start talking about teams, whether that's a product team or an organisational team or a project team, I think you're probably heading towards those right destinations. And I think, making sure your teams are embedded, making sure your teams feel empowered to get away from a keyboard and go and sit with the business teams, sit with the functions that they're accountable for, understand those business areas, understand what those business challenges are, and work with them. I think that's immensely powerful. And unless you've got that, I think you're always going to have an IT team and the business team, and that's probably not where anybody really wants to be in this day and age. I think knowledge and passion for the subject, I think first and foremost, they have to know what they're talking about, and they have to be believable as a trusted advocate for information security. I think that goes hand in hand with the second trait that I'd look for, which is just a level of approachableness, and having an uber mathematical CISO in the wrong organisation is probably the wrong fit. So making sure that your CISO is the right fit for the organisation and the right cultural fit is, I think, hugely important to get that engagement, that empowerment, that trust within the organisation. I think they need to be, hugely adaptable, because there's just so many things going on and there's so many things changing that just having a last year's view or did a good job last time probably isn't good enough for the next 3 years, coming back to one of your previous questions. So that ability to change and to nurture the new things coming through, understand them, build upon them, and really affect that movement forward, and deal with that ambiguity, I think, is probably the third most important trait. I think a CISO has to be incredibly well-rounded. It's not just about the systems, and it's not just about a process. It has to be people, process, and technology, and there has to be an equal level of focus. And I think seeing a CISO who's just process-driven or risk driven is probably in the wrong place, because there's not that rounding to be able to take everybody on the journey. So I think that's part one. I think the other thing to be very, very cautious of as a CISO is the we're all doomed, the sky's falling type approach, and trying to get that buy-in by scare tactics, because you can really overcook that and really either disengage or disenfranchise. And I think making sure that it's a pragmatic conversation about the risks that the business faces and what a business can actually do about them, I think is incredibly important. My remit has to cover all areas and all elements of IT in the business. So I from budget through to run through to change, all of that's CIO turf and territory. I think the CISO absolutely should have and feel empowered to have the right to stop any project, stop any operational change that they feel introduces more risks to the business. And that's a level of trust that the CISO and CIO need to have, because nobody wants to delay an IT project, but if the CISO is saying, look, this is not good enough, this is going to cause a problem, that's what they should be doing. And I think making sure that the CISO has the remit to go and do those things and have those conversations across the IT function is important, but that cross-functional piece is definitely the remit of the CIO.